asked the BuzzFeed community to submit their weirdest paranormal encounters. These are the stories that sent us 3 or 4 years ago. I used to be in my old school's netball team. One day we were waiting for the teacher to come so we could start training. I was in the middle of the pitch and suddenly the lights went out blindly. I tried to find my way back to the other girls, but I tripped over something cold and hard. Out of nowhere, a cold, small hand touched my bare leg, squeezing and rubbing it up and down, as if it, like me, was trying to find a guide in the dark. Out of fear, I asked, "Who is it?" And a feminine, childlike voice, "Androids, it's me," and giggled playfully shortly after the lights came back. I was in one corner of the pitch, while the other 3 girls were huddled close together in the opposite corner. There was no trace of whatever thing had been next to me. I worked at a nursing home, and on one particular rainy night, I was sitting next to one of my residents that had severe dementia out of nowhere. She started screaming bloody murder and shaking a wrinkly, disfigured finger across the room, screaming, "She's dead. She's dead." She'll push her around the building to try and calm her down. That's when I found out that a woman who lived on the other side of the building had just passed away now 5 minutes. Before music, when I was about 6, I was in the bathroom of my grandma's house playing Bloody Mary with my slightly older cousins. We were sitting on the floor in a circle. The only thing behind me was a wall. And when they were doing the chant, I placed my hand on the ground. She uses leverage to scoot myself in the corner for protection. When I did that, I touched bare foot that was directly behind me. It felt like it was actually coming directly out of the wall. I screamed for someone to turn on the lights, and when they did, there was nothing later. Everyone's shoes were on, so it couldn't have been one of our feet. My mom and I were visiting friends and family in Alabama. We were at her friend Amy's house, and they were telling me about all the dumb, scary pranks that did in high school and different urban legends from the area. Before we left for the night, Amy told us a story. My mom apparently hadn't heard sans she had moved away after high school. I was sitting on the trunk of the rental car. She told the story in the driveway of her house. The story was about a specific 4-way stop where a woman had been hit and killed by an 18-wheeler. It was a hit and run. They say that the ghost of this woman jumps on the steps of 18-wheelers that pass through, checking to see if it's the driver that killed her. Needless to say, we had to go through this forward stop to get home. We got closer and closer to the stop. Couldn't really see when it was coming up on a kind of very little lighting in the back roads of Alabama. My mom and I were joking about how glad we were that we weren't in a big truck. Next thing I know, my mom says, the trunk is open." I laughed and said, "Shut up. That's not funny," thinking she was trying to scare me. She pointed to the illuminated light in the dashboard, alerting us that the trunk was in fact open. We pulled up to the 4-way stop. "Can you hop up and close it?" she asks. "Hell no." I scream, "You get out and close it." We looked at each other for a moment and decided to wait until we came to a well-lit parking lot to go close it. I kept looking back to make sure it hadn't flown open. My mom drove through the 4-way, an excruciatingly slow pace to make sure it stayed down. Then I got to thinking, wasn't I sitting on the trunk before we left? All of a sudden, the trunk slams shut. That means slams like full force from fully open, slamming down my mom. And I had one of those comical movie moments where we turned to look at each other, turned back, and then screamed bloody murder, among them Florida, and we raced to the nearest parking lot, frantically screaming nonsense, trying to explain what could have happened. The trunk light was still off when we pulled up into the lot. A Hardee's, we both got out of the car and went around at the trunk on the bottom of the trunk lid to where you touched to close it. Were to muddy fudge test with digging through my mother's bookshelves when I was a child one day while rummaging. I found a book on the occult, so I decided to take it up to my room and make a pact with the devil. Alone in my room, I read aloud various parts of the book till I was certain I found an incantation that was sure to bind my soul to the Dark Lord. Immediately upon finishing the vow, the little overhead light in my bedroom went out. I do not burrow, but completely shattered too. This day, I'm not entirely sure I have ownership over by a mortal soul, my boyfriend, that I went camping together one weekend. This was back before digital cameras were things, so we brought a few disposable ones. We had a good day and took lots of pictures. We went to sleep that night in our sleeping bags with the tent completely as of done. After the trip, we went and dropped off our cameras to get developed, and when we picked up the pictures we saw, there was a series of photos taken of us from inside the tent while we were sleeping that we all was a different size. I thought right away that my boyfriend, a friend, come and take them as a prank, but I was looking at his face when he saw the pictures. He definitely didn't know about them either. To this day, we don't know who took the pictures. Music. I was getting ready for bed late one night, wearing minimal clothes because it was a hot summer night with the windows open. I clicked off the bedside lamp and turned over to go to sleep. It was pitch black in my room because that's the only way I can sleep. Just as I closed my eyes, I heard clear as day the shutter became, or click from over my shoulder. I whirled around and fumbled for the light, but when I turned it on, there was no one in sight. I shrugged it off as my imagination, and I hesitantly turned the light back off and curled up once more, just as I completely dismissed any fears as an overreaction. I heard a low chuckle coming from over my shoulder once more. My bedroom is on the second floor. Music. My house was built in 1923, and my whole family has had eerie experiences. From a ghost who we assume is the man who built the house. He passed away from a heart attack in the bedroom, but had a good life and was known to be a nice person, so we aren't scared of his presence, just creeped out when we hear whistling in the kitchen and no one is in there, or hears someone walking downstairs when we are all in bed. The scariest thing that happened was when I was about 15 years old and was getting ready to take a shower. The water was running, but I had to pee first, and as I was sitting on the toilet, I felt the hair in the back of my neck stand up in the air suddenly went cold. Then a man's voice yelled in my ear. Yeah, I could feel the breath from the side of my face. I was frozen in horror and was finally able to get the guts to bolt on stairs to brew the naked, to the surprise of my mother, who was cooking dinner. She could tell I was horrified, but just gave me a blanket to wrap myself in and laughed her ass off. My uncle died when he was 23. It was a violent and angry death. He took his own life. I was born a year to the day he killed himself after being 2 weeks late already because of that. I've always felt like I have a connection with him. One summer, my cousin and I were sitting in his old bedroom talking about what we thought he was like. We decided to try and contact him with a makeshift Ouija board. But of course, we both shouted at the other for moving it, and it was a bit of a bust. I don't really believe in the Ouija thing anyway, so we went to bed. We were woken up in the morning by a granny asking us who had broken it, that she wasn't mad, she just wanted to know who had broken it. We had no idea what she was. talking about, so she led us to the front room, where a photo frame with a picture of her late uncle was on the floor with the glass smashed. The recent birthday cards from my granddad were still all propped up on the fireplace. Condolence cards from my late uncle's would-be birthday were scattered on the floor. My brother often stays up really late and annoys me when I'm trying to sleep. One night, I woke up and saw a dark, tall figure in my doorway, so I yelled at my brother to go away. The figure stayed there, just staring at me. I got fed up yelling at my brother, so I sat up, and that's when I saw the figure more clearly. Its eyes were hollowed out and had a small head and a long white neck. I sat back in bed, terrified, and the figure kind of turned and crumbled in on itself like it was dissolving into particles and made the sound of someone exhaling. I still have no idea if it was real or just a hallucination, but it was horrible to say the least. Back in high school, my friend Amber claimed her house was haunted. After a night of dinner and shopping with the usual friend, we stopped back at her house so that she could let the dogs there. Two weird things happened. First, the three of us all over Amber's living room for the dog leash, but couldn't find it. We left the room to look for it somewhere else, but when we came back, the leash was sitting on a coffee table in plain sight. There's no way that all three of us could have missed it after searching for 10 minutes. It was like someone had put it there when we left the room. Second, Amber goes to take the dogs outside, and my other friend and I are just out in Amber's living room, waiting. All of a sudden, we hear a man's deep voice call out Emma's name. We both respond. She's in the backyard, taking the dogs out. We'd assumed it was her stepdad, her brother, who had just returned home. Amber comes back inside, and we told her that her stepdad, her brother, was looking for her. But she told us they weren't in town. They went we looked all over the house for a family member, but nobody was home. I work in a Titanic museum filled with real artifacts. We usually hear little things at night, but don't even think about them. But one night we were following the last guests out and cleaning up behind them like normal. I happened to glance through a window into the captain's bridge and saw an officer there against the back wall. He looked up, made eye contact with me, and nodded. I instantly had chills down my spine and just ran out of there. None of the guys who dress up were working that night, and when I got downstairs, I glanced at a picture of the original 1912 crew and came face to face with the officer I saw upstairs. To conclude your videos on the channel Nightmare Realm in a way that aligns with the theme of your spooky content, consider using a creative and eerie outro. Here's a suggestion. Did these tales send shivers down your spine? If you dare for more, remember to whisper your allegiance to the Nightmare Realm by gently pressing the like button. Share these hauntings with the brave souls you know, and subscribe to wander deeper into the realm of nightmares. Until next time, keep one eye open, and remember, the realm is always watching. This outro plays on the theme of the channel, encouraging interaction in a way that keeps the viewers engaged and in tune with the eerie atmosphere of your content.